Hello, and welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and on today's episode, I'm so thrilled because I got a chance to speak with Caroline Maguire. Caroline Maguire is an award-winning author, coach, teacher, and keynote speaker whose work has inspired important conversations around social skills, friendship, and belonging. She's the author of the book Why Will No One Play With Me that has won several awards, including the Best Book Award at the American Book Fest, Mom's Choice Award for Honoring Excellence, and Book Authority's Award for Best ADHD Books of All Time. Caroline and I had a great conversation all about social skills and friendships and best friends, and I hope that you enjoy it. Oh, Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the Calm and Connected podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to chat with you. I know we chat all the time, and I know that we are going to have a lovely conversation. But for people who don't know much about you, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got to do the work that you do?
Sure. So I have been for 20 years an ADHD certified coach. I have a master's degree in education, social emotional learning. And about 20 years ago, when I started as an ADHD coach, I figured out that there was a big thing in the ADHD community, which is that folks have trouble with friendship. And I started helping kids make friends and figure out how to have the kind of skills that they needed. And I just was sort of the only one who really took a passion for this. And so I see folks of all ages, and I wrote a book called Why Will No One Play With Me? And it's to help parents help their kids, because as parents, we're on the front lines. And if we hire a professional, that's great, but sometimes we can't. And even if we hire a professional, there's a lot of hours of the week that we're with our kids, so we need to be empowered with skills.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I always say when I'm working with families, when I'm recommending people. I say, I'm a professional and I have this area of expertise, but I'm here 1 hour a week. I'm here 1 hour every other week. You are doing the majority of this work. I can give you strategies, I can give you skills, I can give you things to work on, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do in the time that I'm not here that builds those skills. And you're the one who's there. You're on the front lines. You're there doing the work every single day. So here are some ideas for you. And that's why I love your book so much, because it gives families a guide through helping kids learn strategies for building friendships and having good strategies to work with other people, to interact with other people.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's like the skill you need, right? To self-advocate, to, go talk to a teacher or a professor and say what you need, to work in groups. They love group projects nowadays in schools. They love them in, college, and you have to be able to work with other people, and even just to not people please and to say, like, hey, that deadline doesn't work for me, or what have you. And then you need to, we know we need friends. We know from the Harvard happiness study that found that the key to happiness is friendship. I was very happy with them when they found that. I was like, I already knew that, but thank you for finding that.
It's nice to have it confirmed, right? A study
said.
Yes, it's what I felt in my heart, what I was noticing with my clients, but now I'm getting academic and research-based proof that this is actually true.
Yes, exactly. I was very happy. I should send them a little note.
So when you're thinking about how to teach kids social skills and how to make friends, what do you start with? How do you get that going? What are your thoughts?
So one of the things I think that is the best way to get things going, I call this paving, because you're paving the way. So often when friendship has been an issue, it becomes the elephant in the room, and it becomes the topic kids least want to talk about. So one of my big pieces of advice is to talk about friendship in general. And this is, I know, annoying, but we as parents have to model certain things. I know it's like it always comes back to stuff we have to do. But the more we talk about our relationships, our friendships, even to say, like, oh, got to be more social. I haven't been doing it lately. I haven't been reaching out to people, or I get too caught up in work. And just to talk about your relationships, talk about how people treat you, talk about what it's like to be treated well, because many neurodivergent kids with learning disabilities, kids with ADHD, kids with autism, because we've been left out so much, we aren't treated that well by people. And one of my personal missions is to get us to the point where we really realize our value and we don't accept less. And so you want to talk about friendship in general, and you want to increase your time doing fun things with your kids. Focus on your relationship, because then you build trust. And through that trust, by not talking about it, I know this is like the irony, they actually are more likely to talk to you. So if they want to play video games, play video games. If they want to go, have dinner at a diner, hang out with you, make slime, do that. Because then they're more likely to open up. If they don't think this is the conversation and it's going to be an interrogation and you're going to like shine a light over their head like you're in Law and Order, then they're more likely to open up.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I talk a lot about, and I've been reading a lot about too, the foundation of making the connection. And it's so important to make that connection. And it sounds like really silly sometimes, I think, like to families, to like, well, if they're having these really big problems, I need to talk about the really big problems. And the challenge is kids don't want to talk about the really big problems if they don't feel like they can talk about like what YouTube channel they're watching, or what happened at lunch today. So the baseline has to be talking about like nonsense, which is fun actually, it's a great way to like connect with your kids. I actually did a whole podcast episode about different ways to connect, and I did talk about like you have to figure out like ask them who do they watch on YouTube and watch the YouTube channels with them. If they like video games, play video games. If they like certain books, read those books and talk about it. Read magazines, do something like baking, going gardening, going on a hike, going on a walk, going on a drive, getting coffee, getting a tea. Those connections, they make it so much easier for them to be able to then start conversations about tougher things, like I'm having trouble with this friendship situation, or I don't know what to do in this social situation. What do I do? It builds that strategy. It builds that baseline so that you can actually have those conversations.
And I think, we have to step into the kids' shoes. So think about yourself. If every time you walk through the door, if every time you walked into the kitchen, your partner, your family, and I know this does happen to us as moms sometimes, hit you with these really hard things you don't want to talk about and that are also embarrassing, because the culture tells us that we're supposed to, have all these friends and everything is easy, when in fact, that's not what the science says. The science doesn't say that having friends and making connections is easy for everyone. That's not really what it is, but the culture promotes that idea. So there's a source of shame in this. And so if they know they can have a conversation, you're going to cook, you're going to be their technical support, you're going to watch the TikTok and the YouTube channel and the whatever, they're not going to fear the interaction as much. Otherwise, they're deer in the woods. They're running away from you. And now you're not having that trust to really get the information you need. Also, by the way, while you're cooking, while you're doing everything, you're getting important intel. You're getting information that fills out the picture, because that's my other big piece of advice. Every time a parent calls me for the past 20 years, they always tell me they know exactly what's going on. And I am here to tell you, they almost never know exactly what's going on. So put aside that you know what is happening and be what I call a social spy, where you are trying to observe and find out information about what is really happening and what is the social picture, what are the dynamics at their school. It really matters and affects how they approach making friends. So you need that information.
Oh, absolutely. And it's powerful when you actually have a better picture of it when so that you can really get an understanding of all the different players. So as a therapist, I tend to like I call the school counselor because I like to get their lay of the land view because they're not only thinking about the particular child that I'm focused on, but they see the whole thing, right? So they have their wealth of information. And then sometimes I'll even have kids like draw out the lunchroom and like show me where everybody sits. That can be powerful, especially middle school, high school. They and that like to just try and get an understanding of like who is where and what does that mean and who sits with who and where do you sit and where do you fit in this whole picture. It's very fascinating to sort of get all that information. And then what do you do? Once you've gathered the information, you have this like great communication that is open with your child. What's the next step?
So then I would start talking about what they want out of friendship. And this is a hard one because if you're the parent of an introvert, if you're a parent of a kid who might be a little more shut down, what they want might be not what you think they need. But you really need a couple of friends, right? And for our kids who are struggling with friendship, the door that I use to open is to build what I call the infrastructure of friendship, which is high interest activities where they can meet like-minded people and they can really connect with those kids and build friendships. And I suggest multiple activities because if you have only one activity, then you have one friend, the friend moves away, now we're in trouble. So what I do next is I'm trying to use interest and what's fun for them as a way to sort of say, okay, what do you want? And then what if we did, this Dungeons and Dragons club? What if we went to Lego? What if we, went to a different town, right? I want them to get confidence, right? So if you are in a super cliquey town where people are not giving them a chance and you're reading Why Will No One Play With Me and you're working with them and you're having these great conversations, but that the kids are not exactly receptive or nice, go somewhere where they will be receptive, build those skills, build that confidence, and then come back, right? Because people will give you a second chance, but we want them to get confidence. And if they go somewhere and people are receptive and they feel good, they're more likely to keep going. So I think you have to talk to the parents, talk to people in town, talk to people and find out like where's a good place for a kid, which karate place do I choose, right? Which venue do I use? Are there coaches that are kind and supportive and, will take a quirky kid and help them out versus someone who is going to be tyrannical and make their lives hell, We have to think about that landscape.
Yeah, we do as parents, we're doing a lot of the legwork, but I think it can be so helpful when you can expand your circle outside of just the particular town that you live in. Sometimes I think people get really focused on, well, it has to be in town because those are the people that we are interacting with. And, for those clicky towns, sometimes if something has happened when kids are younger, it really sort of lingers. And so to give them a fresh start by just going to the next town over where nobody really knows them, you can check out library programs, you can check out the other like karate, D&D. I love the resurgence of D&D. Like I just think it's so much fun. I think it's so much fun. To be able to find those little places where you could potentially have that connection and really going from their interest. I think that point that you made is so important, that we're using the things that they enjoy, using the things that they know a lot about, they want to talk a lot about. If you're really into anime and manga and you're really into Pokemon, like you want to go and hang out with other people who want to talk about Pokemon, or you want to talk about manga,
Right.
you want to watch anime, like, and that's that. And this makes it really easy to start having conversations because you already have a shared language. So you could talk about stuff. It makes the conversation a lot easier to start, which can be really challenging for people if you're going into a situation and you don't know what to talk about. Well, if you're going into a Pokemon club, guess what you're talking about? Pokemon.
Well, exactly. And I think like we're paving the way, right? So we have to remember we're where we are, right? So I think sometimes parents, it's very easy to let other parents and other people's opinions leak into yourself. So let me just say, we all do it. We all have this struggle. But let's think of who your kid is. And I would rather they are so successful at Pokemon Club. And yeah, we can't just talk about Pokemon. We have to learn to talk about different subjects. But that's a skill they need to build. And I tell you how to build it and why will no one play with me. But here's what I'm going to say. If they go to Pokemon and they are a rock star and they feel great and they make connections, then they have this little track that goes in their mind that we've all experienced as adults. I can make friends, right? As opposed to, I send them to something that is not in their interest, not in their orbit, not in their skill set. And now they have less confidence and they have that feeling of failure. So I want them to build confidence, to build connection. And how do you make friends? You have shared experience. And one of the other tips is high interest, high engagement activities, right? And even within something like karate, I'm always asking people, I'm always asking people who are good at these things, like, what's the high engagement element of this? There's sparring, there's teams where you actually get to know people and get to have those connections. So it's really important that they have engagement. And Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, all those things have engagement. There's also studies now that show that Dungeons and Dragons and role play games like that can build social skills. So it's not just like, oh, I'm sending them. No, we're sending them and they're learning to connect.
Oh, absolutely. D&D is one of those things people, I think, don't really quite understand the social piece of that. Like it's like you're in a group and you have to work together. You're working together. You're communicating together. It is very social. It is you have to, and you are pulled to want to do more, to be part of the group, to go on the quest, to do whatever you're doing. Like it is highly engaging and it's highly motivating. You want to stay in the group. You want to continue to go, and if it's a thing that was lasting for several weeks, like you're engaged in it over time. Like I think there's something really cool. If you really like D&D, it's a phenomenal way to help you build and connect with other people. I think it's wonderful, actually.
And if your kid is going to stuff and you're like, oh, I want to, I'm not sure, it's not really working. One of my litmus tests is to check, are they solo activities or are they highly interactive? So a lot of times when parents reach out to me, DM me, whatever it is, I will hear their story and I immediately diagnose those are solo activities. Now, for some kids who are neurodivergent, I totally get it. Like they maybe aren't as great on a soccer team and they do like more of the solo stuff. But even within activities, there are certain teams, certain groups, certain coaches who make it more interactive, right? So swim is a solo activity, but swim team has a ton of sitting around in a bullpen, playing cards, interacting, making signs for the meet. That is interactive. So if your kid you're like, they're signed up for 8 million things, but they aren't connecting and they aren't making friends, even soccer and stuff, there has to be an interactive element. If they're just going, plopping down their bag, playing, and not even speaking to anyone, they're not getting that shared experience interactive element. So if you're sitting here listening and you're like, I'm not sure what's going on, that's a great way to sort of check things, because I find that that's something that we can tweak, right? We can join a different version of this that they love that has interactive elements.
Right. Especially like a soccer for example, like if the team is pretty cohesive and they're cheering each other on in the sidelines, they're engaged on the sidelines, they're chatting with each other about stuff that needs to happen in the game, or just in general, like enjoying each other's company, versus like the coach is maybe a yeller and maybe like very driven to win versus have fun and play. Like to be paying attention to those sorts of things and figuring out what is going to work best for your child. If they're going to thrive in that environment where they are being pushed, okay. But if they're not going to thrive in that, that's cool too. And then you just need to find a place where they are, where it's more focused on having fun and playing, and the team building piece of doing a group activity like soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just say from personal experience, when my daughter was little, she did ballet and she did Irish step. And at some point we had to choose. And I was thrilled she chose Irish step, because Irish step was a bunch of kids together of all different ages. And it was like this really cohesive, everybody cheering each other on, thriving environment. And that means that there's not competition, it's not cutthroat. It's actually a pure meritocracy. If you're 12 and you can go further than someone who's 19, you're going. So I think there's ways that we have to just sort of look at things. And one of the lines I always use is, I'm doing what's right for my family. So if you switch ballet studios or you switch soccer teams, when people ask, just say, hey, I'm doing what's right for my family, because sometimes it's that little pivot too that opens up the door for a kid to be in the same high interest activity, but to allow that interactive and supportive environment, frankly.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that question. Or I love that statement. This is what I'm doing what's best for my family. I'm doing, and because you are, and then you're the expert in your child. So if you know it's not working, we got to tweak something, and it's okay to drop things. Like, I think that's
Right.
like, it's okay to be done with something. Our schedules can be overwhelming, and you don't feel like you shouldn't feel like you have to do all the things to keep up with everybody. Do what works for you and your family. Absolutely.
And all the research shows too that this overcommitment is a race to nowhere, and there's no actual benefit. So we're really about learning coping skills for kids, as you would say, and learning to make connection and to make friends and to have enjoyment. And so, that little pivot can really help. And then confidence lifts up. And so much of kids who are left out making friends, it does go back to, do they have the belief that this can work out, right? Resilience is actually, I believe that if I have a problem, I can solve it, or I can turn to one trusted adult and they can help me solve it. And so, them having confidence allows them to launch. Them being in a constant situation where they're hearing negative messages, it's not going to allow them to have that confidence to be themselves and to make friends.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you this question, because I think sometimes parents will wonder about this. What do I do if my child has no best friend?
Oh, I love this question. So if your child has no friends, obviously I'm concerned. But if they don't have a best friend, I'm not concerned. And I'll tell you why. I think there's this myth of the best friend. I often hear from people who have multiple friends, and they'll say, well, I don't have a best friend, so I'm like a social failure. And I'm like, well, let's move away from that black and white thinking, and let's think about that. Are you fulfilled, right? We have different friends for different purposes. And, maybe you have a friend you watch horror movies with. Maybe you have a friend you talk about Taylor Swift with. Maybe you have a friend you build Legos with, right? And I think this romanticization of the best friend is, from our culture, from our friendship bracelets, from our, little necklaces we used to wear. And I'm not saying that it's not nice to have a best friend, but research shows you get 2 to 3 really, really close friends in your entire lifetime. So if you're 10 and you don't have a best friend, it doesn't mean you're in trouble. What I want is for someone to have intimate, deep relationships. So if they have a good friend, someone who they can count on, someone who's going to, give them refuge from the mean person, someone who's going to be there for them, I don't think you need a best friend. I do think there are kids who have very thin social relationships, and this came up a lot in COVID, where because they didn't have as much connection and their relationships were very superficial, they didn't have people to text and call, and they were like, I can't call these people because they're really not my friends. That is different, right? That I want them to build more deep friendships. But, we have many people who come into our lives and they play a role, and they're your fun friend. They're your, I have to go complain friend. And to say one person is going to encompass all that, I don't necessarily know that that's true. And I would also ask parents to reflect, like, do you have only one person in your life? Probably not. You might even have a close friend, and then one of your work friends plays a role. One of your, other friends plays a role. So I feel like kids feel so bad if they don't have a best friend, when maybe there's no one person who fulfills all their needs.
Right. And I think we need to be more thoughtful around that, and to actually look at the depth of the friendships that the kids have. Like, are they just friends with people because they shared space and they had a shared they were in the same classroom, they were in the same group for something, but then they didn't really get deeper with that friendship, right? Versus, oh, we're hanging out, we're doing other things, but it doesn't necessarily have to have the title of best friend. And I think to reflect for all of us to be thoughtful about, like, well, nobody fulfills all my needs as a friend, a best friend, totally. Like, you as an adult, you go to different people for different needs. And do you feel fulfilled? It's really about, like, do I feel like I can get the support I need? I have fun with my friends. I get help and respect and laughter with my friends. Do I get all of those things that I need? That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think there's, I get it. Like, I was a teenager too. I get it. Like, there's this, I need someone to share a yearbook page with. I need somebody who's gonna, do this and that. And I understand that, right? I totally understand those drivers. But I also think that if you look and you have that fulfillment and you have those deeper relationships, then, to be so disappointed in yourself because you don't have that one best friend, does your kid fight with other kids, or do they get along, right? Because if you have one best friend, but you're constantly, fighting and in conflict with each other, I don't know that that's better. It's just something I hear so often. I mean, people literally write me emails and they're like, will my kid have a best friend this year? And I did a blog about that because I was like, that's hard, because I don't know that everyone is going to get a best friend. And I don't want people to feel so disappointed when they don't have one.
Right. It's more about the quality of who is around you and the quality of the relationships that you have, rather than the actual title of best friend.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay. We could talk all day, and I know we could. It's like so easy to do, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I always ask my guests, what are your coping skills? How do you rest and relax?
Okay, so one of my coping skills is that I exercise basically every day. I think that I have to get some and expel some of that energy out, and expel some of the just stress and toxins. I do yoga a few times a week, but I won't pretend that I actually enjoy yoga. I will tell you that I do it because I'm tightly wound. I do a technique of breathing that I know I've seen in many of your things about, 8 counts in and then releasing. And I whenever I deep breathe, I feel much better about everything in life. And I admit something that I really enjoy podcasts. And when I watch, YouTube or I listen to podcasts, I find that very relaxing, and I find that it pulls some of the stress from my body. I'm highly in the auditory processing category, so I find that really helps me. And sometimes if I can't sleep at night, I put on a podcast and I'm out.
You know what I do? I listen to something every night because it helps me get out of my own brain, actually.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I'm just spinning in there and this is not helpful for anyone. Let me put something on. And it's stuff I've listened to already. It's how many times can a lady listen to Harry Potter? I don't know, but I'm working on it.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. Yeah. And that's the thing. I often, because I'm an anxious person, I often actually do listen and watch things that I have watched and listened to before. Yep. But they actually comfort me and they allow me to sort of recenter myself.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Caroline, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for everybody listening, thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please take a moment and share it with your friends or colleagues, or rate it wherever you listen. That helps us get found. And as always, don't forget about yourself. Take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.